Hi guys. First off, slight apology. My voice is a bit dodgy today, so if I'm a bit croaky, I apologise for that. Anyway, let's get on with it. My previous video looked at the hardware of the two major consoles in terms of their relative performance, so today I'd like to take a look at the peripherals. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the third-party controllers, third-party headsets, or any other items such as cooling hardware that some people attach to their machines for God knows what reason, or some of the more dubious mods. You know what I'm talking about. So you'll need to look elsewhere if you're interested in that stuff. This series of videos is aimed squarely at people who are still on the fence as regards which of the consoles they should purchase, if any. So I'm going to concentrate exclusively on the first-party gear. Right, so to the peripherals. Both Microsoft and Sony offer a range of peripherals, obviously, from controllers and headsets through to motion control devices like, the Kinect and PS4 camera. But Microsoft at the moment has a wider selection and some very nice looking controllers if you're into theme stuff, as well as obviously the Elite controller and the official chat pad, which came out around about the same time. I'll get to those in a little while, but first I'd like to talk about one of the most important components of any console. I've already touched on it a little bit, and that's the controller that you get in the package. Right, well, so here is a look at mine. I've got a few of them, along with a few other bits and pieces that I've got spread out here. You can have a look at those. Both Microsoft and Sony, as you'd expect, have redesigned their controllers for this current generation. Microsoft have touted around about 40 changes and improvements, but it's the DualShock 4 which appears to have had the biggest makeover with the introduction of the central touchpad. It's a nice addition, but one which seems a little bit superfluous at times, as it acts as little more than an extra button. I'm not sure I'd blame Sony for this, though. Rather maybe it's a lack of imagination by the developers, or it's even about the need to keep controls in games standardised. It wouldn't be the first time that innovations in control design have had little impact as a result of this requirement. Just look at the Wii U controller. But anyway, I digress. I'm not going to talk about the Wii U here. Other changes in the PS4 controller include the introduction of lights just above the charging port, which change colour to indicate the player. Blue for player 1, red for player 2, and so on. It's a nice idea, but some people hate it, saying it drains the battery, and that's obviously going to be annoying. Personally, I haven't really noticed the lights. While I have noticed that the DualShock tends to run down quite quickly, I can't say whether it's the lights that have any bearing on that particular problem. But I would like to talk a little more about charging and batteries in a moment, so we'll get round to that. The only other thing of note on the DualShock 4 is the speaker, which is sometimes used in-game for radio messages for non-playing characters or recordings that have been left around the game and so on. Again, I keep saying this, but it's a nice addition, I suppose. But when I'm playing the same game on the Xbox One, I don't even notice, to be honest. The sound comes out of the speakers and that's fine by me, as long as I can hear what's going on. So, you might like it, but it's a gimmick. Despite the large number of changes in the Xbox One controller, as with the DualShock 4, it's easy to spot its lineage. The Xbox One controller feels very familiar if you're used to the 360 controller. The only real difference I noticed is when I first picked up the new controller, the large X button in the middle of the controller has been moved more towards the front and it's been shrunk down somewhat, which initially made locating it a little bit difficult, especially if you're playing in the dark. I know it glows, but really you don't want to be looking at the controller. Now, it might seem like I'm nitpicking here, but it did infuriate me to begin with. And even now, I still have to reach to press it, and I've got bloody long fingers, believe me. Other than the small issues I've raised above, though, both controllers feel good in the hand, with buttons set out pretty easily so you can locate them, as I say, without looking at the screen. More than anything else, which one you prefer, though, will depend on the size and shape of your hands, or whether you're coming from the 360 or the PS3. Now, it won't necessarily be the case for everybody. I've got a friend who was a 360 owner and actually prefers the DualShock 4, which is a bit perverse if you ask me, but, that's his thing. He prefers the DualShock 4. My take is that I'm slightly in favour of the Xbox One controller in terms of how it feels, but there really isn't a lot in it. You could play both of them for hours at a time and be quite happy. Well, as long as the battery holds out, and that brings us to the point I raised earlier. This is one area where the Xbox One controller has a fairly decent advantage over the DualShock 4. The DualShock 4 has a rechargeable battery, which seems like a good idea on the face of it, but it can leave you stuck if you're low on juice while in the middle of a game. Yeah, you can plug the controller in and use it as a wired controller, but the lead that comes with it is quite short, to the point where I've been sitting directly under my television with a crick in my neck trying to get to a save game so I could finish the game before the pain got unbearable. Yeah, you could buy a longer lead, but that's an added annoyance, not to mention cost. Of course, my solution was to buy two controllers and charge one while using the other, but obviously if you're playing two-player games, that could still be a problem. And, what are you going to do when the internal battery dies? All these gadgets that we've got these days, eventually the internal battery dies. And when that goes, you're going to need to replace the controller rather than just bunging a new battery in there. The Xbox One controller, on the other hand, can use ordinary batteries, and it comes with two in the box when you buy a controller. You can purchase a playing charge kit, obviously, and I have, but frankly it isn't required and I wouldn't bother. You'd be better off getting some rechargeable batteries and a charger, then you can just swap the batteries out as needed and keep on playing. That's what I do personally, and I think it's the best solution. But, obviously some people disagree. Again, it comes down to how and where you play. If you're gaming up close to a monitor, then rechargeable controllers are a good idea. For me, sitting 8 foot away in a lounge, not so good. Especially if you have kids running around. Believe me. Right, well, anyway, I think I've covered most of it, but there's one other issue that I have to address, and that's quality control. Anyone following my channel knows that I have a couple of Xbox controllers that have failed on me, and I'm not the only one. It seems there's an issue with the thumbsticks, at least on the early models. I really can't comment on the newer controllers, or the Elite for that matter. I own both a Halo Spartan Lock controller and an Elite controller, but they're relatively new, so only time will tell on those. But the DualShock 4 has issues too. Quite a few people have had to deal with the thumbsticks splitting, the covering on them splitting away. That's not a perfect situation by any manner of means. I personally haven't had that problem, but you only have to do a quick search on Google to see that it's quite common. But anyway, quality control issues aside, both the PS4 and the Xbox One controllers are frankly excellent. You'd expect them, as the generations go on, they hone and refine these controllers. Neither of them are perfect, but there's nothing here that really should stop you buying either platform. If you can, try them before you purchase, but as I said in my previous video, you should make your choice based on other criteria, quite frankly. So anyway, that's the controllers out of the way. What about the other peripherals? Well, both controllers come with headsets, so neither of them are anything to write home about. The Xbox One headset looks slightly higher in quality and I find it a little bit more comfortable to use. But frankly, you'd be better off buying a decent headset at the first opportunity, whatever platform you choose, especially if you're doing a lot of online gaming. Obviously, if you're not, then forget it. Then there's Kinect and the PlayStation camera. I own the Kinect because it was bundled with my Xbox when I bought it, but I don't own the PlayStation camera, so I can't give you my own personal experience with it. What I will say though is that both of them are, well, little more than gimmicks. There are a few games for them, but they're not all that. And frankly, they don't add much to the user interface. In fact, the Kinect was in some respects at least a hindrance up until recently. You can hear it in my voice, it annoys me. Because it would pick up hand movements when you didn't want it to. It was annoying, basically. But anyway, gesture controls have now been dropped from the new Xbox One experience, so that's all gone and you can forget about it. I'll cover that a little more in detail in my next video when I look at the user interfaces of the two machines. Suffice to say, you don't really need either of these peripherals. The one major exception to this, and it could be the difference, is the voice commands that come with the Kinect. They're extremely useful, especially once you get used to them. I would have preferred a mic to have been built into the controller, as is the case with the NVIDIA Shield, but having a hulking great lump of plastic under the front of your telly is, I suppose it's tolerable. But once you've used the voice commands a few times, it really is hard to get used to not having them. They're especially useful for taking screenshots or recording short clips, though that can be done without the Kinect now a lot more easily now with the new Xbox One experience. But as I say, I'll get into that when I look at the user interfaces. And if you've got the chat pad, they've got buttons for take a screenshot and record a video. So Kinect or chat pad, maybe you want to choose one or the other perhaps, I don't know. I've got both. You could get by without both, to be honest. To be honest, on balance, unless you have a really pressing need for either of these add-ons, again, I'd save your money and buy more games. And as I touched on with the chat pad, you can happily do without that too, especially if you have a tablet or a phone connected to your Xbox or your PS4. You don't get an official chat pad with the PlayStation, but you can buy third-party ones. I prefer first-party gear on the whole, but if you do use a tablet, it's very easy to use the on-screen keyboard, and you can use that for texting people and so on within game. And you can happily do without the chat pad or Kinect or the third-party alternatives for the PS4. What else can I say really? Basically, both consoles have fantastic controllers. They really are good controllers. Functional headsets and, well, as you probably guessed, all but pointless camera attachments. Microsoft have removed the yoke of Kinect from around the Xbox One's neck, so you can buy it without the Kinect now, and I would suggest you probably do, unless you've used it and you really do need it. So the only other peripheral really is the Elite controller, and if you can afford it and you feel that you need it, then if you want to spend 120 quid on that, then fill your boots. It is gorgeous, but it is very expensive. Other than that, there's very little to sway you either way. As far as I'm concerned, as far as hardware's concerned, as far as peripherals concerned, it's pretty much a draw. Really, honestly. As I keep saying, there are other criteria though which are far more important. Let me give you a spoiler here. I'm going to be talking about games later on. That's going to be far more important than any of the other things I've discussed so far. Okay, well anyway, that's it for peripherals. As I say, my next video is going to deal with the user interface of both consoles. So keep your eyes out for that one. But for now, that's me done. I will speak to you guys again soon. Bye.